Mr. President, yesterday the senior senator from Arizona and the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee came to the floor to speak to an issue and mentioned my name several times during the course of his remarks on the floor. I come this morning to respond to the senior senator from Arizona. Let me tell you what the issue is. The issue is a decision by the Department of Defense on October 7th of this year to place the University of Phoenix, a not-for-profit university, on probation and prohibit the company from enrolling new Department of Defense tuition assistants and MICA beneficiaries. The company, University of Phoenix, was under this Department of Defense order barred from accessing military bases. This is a serious action, and there's a reason for it. The senior senator from Arizona came to the floor to protest this decision by the Department of Defense and to protest also other actions that have been taken relative to other for-profit universities. I come this morning to respond. What's at stake here is something that's very essential. When men and women volunteer for our military, hold their hands up and say, "I'm willing to die for this country," they make a promise, and we make a promise. Our promise is that if you will serve this country and risk your life for America, we'll stand by you when you come home. If you're injured, we'll provide medical care. If you want to pursue education and training, we'll help you do it. In fact, we'll even help your family do it. And many other benefits that we rightly promise to these members of the military. So the GI Bill, which is it's been characterized as the GI Bill since World War II, is really the vehicle that gives to many of these service members, while they are serving and after they've completed their service, a chance to build their lives. It's a generous program, and it should be. And it's generous for their families, and it should be. But it is virtually a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We hope that these members of the military and their family choose well in terms of courses that they need to take, training that they need to prepare for their lives after they've served our country. And we have a responsibility when it comes to those who are currently in the service to monitor the activities of a lot of the schools that are offering education and training. We would be derelict in our responsibility if we did not. So the Department of Defense wrote down a memorandum of understanding to all schools saying that if you want to offer GI Bill training and education, if you want to offer training for the families of service members, here are the rules to play by. And I think virtually every institution of higher learning knows going in to follow the rules, whatever your institution may be. Let me say a word about the University of Phoenix. This is not just another for-profit school. It's the largest by far. At the height of their enrollment, the University of Phoenix, a for-profit university, largely offering online courses, had as many as 600,000 students. That is dramatically more than the combined enrollment of all the Big Ten colleges and universities. Over the years, in the last 5 years, they have decided to reduce the size of their student body. It's now slightly over 200,000. As an individual institution, it's the largest in America. And it certainly is the largest of for-profit colleges and universities. You can hardly escape the advertising of the University of Phoenix. They have the naming rights to the stadium where the Arizona Cardinals play their football games in Arizona. They have advertising on television, on radio, billboards in every direction. It is a company that markets in every direction and, as a consequence, has built a large student enrollment. How about the University of Phoenix in terms of the dollars that they receive? That's the interesting thing. Unlike universities and colleges around the United States, whether in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Illinois, or whatever, these for-profit universities get a substantial portion of all of their revenue directly from the Treasury through Pell Grants and student loans. Dramatically higher percentages of their revenue come from the Treasury than virtually any other college or university. This is unique to the for-profit college and university sector. They are the most heavily subsidized, for-profit, private businesses in America today. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. 82% of the revenue coming to the University of Phoenix, $2.7 billion, comes out of Title IV, 82% of their revenue. When it comes to the Department of Defense tuition assistance, University of Phoenix is the fourth largest recipient in the United States, $20 million. Under the GI Bill, they're the largest recipient from the Department of Defense and the Treasury, $346 million. Their CEO, Mr. Capelli, is paid $8 million a year in total compensation, dramatically more than virtually any other university president in the ordinary course of higher education. What is a record? University of Phoenix students cumulatively owe more in student debt than any educational institution in America. University of Phoenix students owe $35 billion in student loans. Only half of the University of Phoenix borrowers are paying down their debt 5 years after graduation or after they've dropped out of school. Only half. That means that more than half are defaulting. Phoenix's overall 3-year repayment rate, that means how many borrowers are making payments on their debt after 3 years, 41%. Over half of the University of Phoenix students and graduates, after 3 years out of school, less than half are paying back. Their 5-year repayment rate, 47%. Nearly 1 out of every 2 students who graduated or dropped out in 2009 has defaulted within 5 years. The University of Phoenix's 5-year cohort default rate, that is, students who graduated in 2009 through 2014, 45%. The Arizona location, which includes online students from across the country, 4-year bachelor-seeking graduation rate is 1%. And the 6-year bachelor-seeking graduation rate, 10%. This industry, for-profit colleges and universities, there are 3 numbers to remember. 10% of the students graduating from high school go to these for-profit schools. 20% of all the federal aid to education goes to these schools. Why? They're very expensive. The tuition they charge is dramatically more than colleges and universities across the country. But here's the number to remember. As an industry, 40% of all the student loan defaults are students that attend for-profit colleges and universities. Why? It's so darned expensive, students can't continue the education and drop out, or they complete the education and find many times the diploma is worthless. So now let's go back to the Department of Defense. We want to protect our men and women in uniform from being exploited by any college or university, for-profit or not. And so the Department of Defense wrote down a memorandum of understanding and said, if you want to offer courses to our men and women in uniform, here are the rules to play by. On October the 7th, the Department of Defense announced that they placed the University of Phoenix on probation and prohibited them from enrolling new service members in the DoD tuition assistance and MICA programs. They barred them from accessing military bases. The decision, the department said, was based on violations of the Memorandum of Understanding, which I've described this morning, based on their own review. So yesterday, the senior senator from Arizona, came to the floor to protest this decision by the Department of Defense. There were several things which he said during the course of his floor statement which I would like to address. The senator from Arizona claimed that the Department of Defense's, quote, actions were taken without due process, close quote, and based on, quote, an outside investigative report, close quote. The senator went on to say there, quote, wasn't a department investigation, there was no scrutiny, close quote. He said that on the floor to protest the Department of Defense decision. Here's the fact. The Department of Defense conducted nearly 4 months of review of the University of Phoenix's practices after the report by the Center for Investigative Reporting raised allegations relating to the company's strategy using corporate sponsorship of events on military bases to skirt the federal rules on recruitment that had been spelled out in the Memorandum of Understanding. The Department of Defense placed the University of Phoenix on probation when its review, quote, revealed several violations of the Department of Defense Memorandum of Understanding. DoD also gave the company 14 days to provide the Department of Defense with materials in response to the decision. To argue that there was no due process in this is betrayed by the facts. The senator from Arizona went on to say, quote, if the University of Phoenix is guilty of some wrongdoing, I want to be one of the first to ensure the proper penalties are enacted, close quote. Here's the fact. The Department of Defense confirmed that the University of Phoenix is guilty of wrongdoing. The Department of Defense's notice to the university stated that, quote, it conducted a review of the agreements between the University of Phoenix and the Department of Defense as reflected in the Memorandum of Understanding. This review revealed several violations of the Memorandum of Understanding attributed to the University of Phoenix, including, but not limited to, transgression of Defense Department policies regarding the use of its official seals or other trademark insignia, failure to go through responsible education advisors for each business-related activity requiring access to Department of Defense installations. They go on to say that they found that the, quote, frequency and scope of these previous violations is, quote, disconcerting, close quote. Despite this, the senior senator from Arizona is urging the Department of Defense to ignore what they found in their investigation and to reverse their decision putting the company on probation. The senator from Arizona went on to call Phoenix violations, quote, minor breaches in decorum, close quote, technical in nature, close quote. The Department of Defense found that the University of Phoenix violated terms of its Memorandum of Understanding, a legal document laying out the rules and standards that every institution must adhere to be eligible to participate in voluntary military education programs. For instance, this document specifies that the base's education officer, not the base commander, is the sole approving authority for any and all access to the base. In their violation of this Memorandum of Understanding provision, the Department of Defense called the University of Phoenix's violations disconcerting in their frequency and scope. The company had a corporate strategy of spending millions of dollars to sponsor events on military bases to skirt Department of Defense rules and the 2012 executive order that was designed to prohibit institutions from recruiting service members on military bases. Mr. President, let me spell out some of the things that were being done by the University of Phoenix. And remember what we're talking about here. This university is receiving $20 million a year through the DoD tuition assistance and $346 million through the GI Bill. Of course, it's a big profit center for them to continue this educational pursuit, and they spent a lot of money to support it, and that's what got them in trouble. The University of Phoenix spent over $250,000 in the last 3 years just in one location, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, sponsoring 89 events, one featuring a performer named Big Smo. That alone cost $25,000 to the University of Phoenix. Across the country, Phoenix sponsored events on military bases, including rock concerts, Super Bowl parties, father-daughter dances, Easter egg hunts, chocolate festivals, and even brunch with Santa. The University of Phoenix paid the Department of Defense to have its staff serve as exclusive resume advisors in hiring our heroes' job fairs and workshops, many on military bases. A hidden camera from the Center for Investigating Reporting documented that all of the resume workshop materials, presentations, and slides and sample successful resumes were labeled with University of Phoenix marketing, and trainers urged attendees to go to the University of Phoenix website for more information. Now, Phoenix used challenge coins, which the senator from Arizona raised on the floor, with DoD seals and logos to show its close relationship with the military without receiving prior approval. The senator from Arizona noted other schools have done the same thing, including, he mentioned, Southern Illinois University. I'm not going to send a letter to the DoD protesting. if they hold SIU or any school accountable for the same conduct as University of Phoenix. The senior senator from Arizona did. And I think that he ought to reflect on that for a moment. The senator from Arizona says the University of Phoenix has a long history of serving non-traditional students such as active duty military and others. According to Paul Rykoff of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, the University of Phoenix, quote, is constantly reported as the single worst by far, close quote, when it comes to for-profit colleges taking advantage of his members. The senator from Arizona says that the agency for financial CFPB, the Education Department, and California Attorney General Kamala Harris drove another for-profit school, Corinthian, out of business without ever proving misconduct. And now we're attempting to do the same to the University of Phoenix. The fact is that there are ongoing investigations of the University of Phoenix by the Federal Trade Commission related to unfair and deceptive practices, including military recruitment and the handling of student personal information. There is an investigation underway of the University of Phoenix by the Department of Education's Inspector General related to marketing, recruitment, enrollment, financial aid processing, fraud prevention, student retention, personnel training, attendance, academic grading, etc. There is an ongoing investigation of the University of Phoenix by the Securities and Exchange Commission relating to insider trading. And not one, but 3 different state attorneys general are investigating the University of Phoenix for unfair and deceptive practices. The senator from Arizona comes and protests that we are involved in some sort of ideological grandstanding. That's what he said. Ideological grandstanding, ignoring the evidence which I have presented this morning about the investigations of the University of Phoenix going on across agencies, state and federal, and the investigation by the Department of Defense which led to this decision. He also goes on to say, yesterday in his remarks, I want to quote them directly. Excuse me. Quote, last year, the Education Department, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and an individual named Ms. Harris mounted a coordinated campaign that drove for-profit Corinthian College out of business without ever proving misconduct. They were able to drive a college out of business. What a coincidence that he would make that statement on the floor of the United States Senate yesterday, the same day that a federal judge in Chicago ordered Corinthian colleges, now bankrupt, to pay $530 million to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, resolving a year-long lawsuit against the for-profit chain for allegedly steering students into predatory student loans. The CFPB director, Richard Cordray, said in a statement, quote, today's ruling marks the end of our litigation against a company that has severely harmed tens of thousands of students, turning dreams of higher education into a nightmare, close quote. I don't understand how the senator from Arizona can come to the floor the same day that this federal decision is being handed down and raise this issue without some knowledge of what Corinthian colleges were doing. What they were doing was lying. They were misrepresenting to the federal government how many students were employed after they graduated. It turns out Corinthian was paying employers several $1,000s to hire their students, graduates, for a month or two so they could report to the federal government they had jobs. And of course, when the money ran out from Corinthian, the students lost those part-time jobs. They were caught at it. They were asked to provide information to refute what I've just said. Instead of doing that, they started dissembling and going out of business. They were also steering students to what they called Genesis loans at Corinthian College. Students were paying outrageous tuition and fees for bachelor's degrees, $60,000 or $75,000, and then they were facing Genesis loans, they called them, interest rates as high as 15%. This industry does have good schools and good courses in the for-profit business sector, I'm sure. But there's clearly been misconduct, and we have to call them on it and hold them responsible. It is our federal government that virtually acknowledges the accreditation of these schools. It is our federal government that offers Pell Grants and direct student loans to their students, creating the impression among students and families that these are perfectly good colleges and universities. And we have a responsibility to students and families across this nation to police their ranks when there is misconduct. In this case, the Department of Defense looked closely and decided that the University of Phoenix was involved in misconduct. And that's why they reached their decision. Mr. President, there was a letter that was prepared by a number of organizations. I won't read all of their names, but it was sent October 27th this week to the Honorable Ashton Carter, Secretary of Defense, thanking the department for their recent action when it came to the University of Phoenix. These organizations went on to catalog the things that I've said here this morning. They also talk about the students that these organizations have worked with. They found in this letter, it says, service members' complaints regarding the University of Phoenix fall into three categories. Service members who were signed up for loans without their knowledge or permission after being promised they would incur no loans. Service members who were misled about the cost and tuition increases at the University of Phoenix. Service members who were misled about the accreditation and transferability of University of Phoenix credits. Yesterday, the senator from Arizona cited three students. I would like to read from this letter. They note three students who were members of the military commenting on the University of Phoenix. The first, Cody Eady of the U.S. Marines, says, quote, "I was told these credits would transfer anywhere nationwide, but as I begin my transition from active duty, I find out they will not transfer to the schools in my home state. I wasted my time and 15 credits for nothing." Statement from Aaron Potter, U.S. Army, quote, "I was told by the University of Phoenix that I'd be eligible for grants that I did not have to pay back. I came to find out they enrolled me in loans, and now I can't afford the payments." Statement from Dennis Chamberlain, the U.S. Army, "I attended the University of Phoenix to attain my bachelor's degree. I racked up close to $20,000 in debt. I feel they targeted me for my military student aid. I struggle every month paying back the student loans I could have avoided. I was shot twice in Afghanistan by shrapnel from RPGs." The letter signed by about 20 different organizations: Air Force Sergeants Association, the Association of the United States Navy, the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, Blue Star Families, Paralyzed Veterans of America. I ask unanimous consent to submit this letter for the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I'm going to wrap up here. I read carefully what the senator from Arizona had to say yesterday, and I hope I've addressed each of the major points which he raised. There was indeed an investigation. There were standards which the University of Phoenix agreed to follow and then failed to follow. There is an effort underway to make sure we protect men and women in the military and their families from exploitation when it comes to their GI Bills. We should continue that effort. I hope that my friend and colleague from Arizona, who has made a record in the Senate speaking up, standing up to avoid those misuses of federal funds, will continue in that same vein when it comes to this issue. We want money well spent. We want our men and women in uniform well served. Mr. President, I yield the floor.